From MVD Entertainment on DVD comes Heart and Soul, a love story. This is a film directed by and starring or hosted by, I guess I would say, documentary, Kenny Vance. It might be the name you don't know. When I was watching the opening credits of this, I didn't know a lot of the names, but as the film went on, I was like, oh, I know these people. Kenny Vance was one of the founders of Jay and the Americans. It's a group that, if you don't know the name, you know some of the songs they put out. And this is a documentary about doo-wop, basically. It's Kenny Vance, who was, Jay and the Americans started as basically a doo-wop group, and they went in to become more of a pop rock group over time. And he's basically interviewing all these people who are huge influences on him, people whose records he used to love when he was a kid back in the 50s and early 60s. And this is fantastic. This is really, really good. I had never heard about this documentary. The date on the documentary is 2023, but I think the majority of this was probably shot in 2002 because it sort of revolves around this vocal group Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And I looked up when that ceremony was that inducted all of these people, and it was 2002. So basically, he is interviewing all these people who were being inducted that year, and you see them in their normal life now. You see them at the time, surprisingly young. You realize how young some of these people were when they formed these groups and had their hits, so that when he came around like 40 years later, they were maybe in their 50s, maybe dipping into their 60s. Featuring some of these people, some, but maybe more than this. Eugene, Pitt and the Jive Five, Wally Roker and the Heartbeats, Arlene Smith and the Chantels, Cleveland Still and the Dubs, Jimmy Merchant and Frankie Lyman's Teenagers, Little Anthony and the Imperials, and Jay and the Americans. And it's just, when I was a kid, give you a little insight. I'm not going to tell you the whole story of me. When I was a kid, my father had grown up in the 50s, and he loved 50s music. He would always say they didn't make any good music after 1962. And then I would point out a few great songs that he liked after that, and that conversation would go in a different way. But most of what I had to listen to as a kid that I could control, we had an 8-track player under the TV in the living room, and we had all of these, what was it called? I could almost remember. It wasn't an American Graffiti soundtrack, but it was called a Graffiti Scrapbook, and it was one of those 2-record sets that was just all of that kind of music, that 50s, early 60s pop music, early rock and Elvis 8-track and all that. So my foundation for music is the music that they're talking about in this film. So it was so cool to see these people and to see what great songs that influenced people for generations and are still great songs, who the people were behind those. Because you know the music in this film, you just don't know the names of the bands because maybe they had one hit, or maybe you just heard it in passing, or maybe it was used in a commercial or whatever. But it's amazing to see these people and hear their stories, and to see them sing, when I say now, sing it in 2002, decades later, and they still have those voices and they still sound great. It is a wonderfully loving tribute to these people. Made me misty a couple times. This apparently was shown at some point on PBS, so you may have seen it that way. This is absolutely worth owning if you are a person who's into this kind of music. I get a lot of these review discs and I watch them, and some I like and some I don't like, but I don't keep all of them. This is one I'm going to be keeping because this is one I want to revisit. I want to feel good again the way this documentary made me feel good the first time that I watched it. So a lot of this is Kenny Vance going to the old neighborhood. There's a certain section in, I want to say it was Queens or Brooklyn, where a lot of these people came from, and they talk repeatedly about that, where you go over there and that group would be singing, and at night you could just hear all of these doo-wop groups, these kids in the projects were forming, singing. And to see some of these guys who are now 50s, 60s, or older going back to the old neighborhood and sitting on a stoop and just talking with him about how their groups formed and all that. It's not all sunshine and lollipops. They do talk a lot about how a lot of these groups were really hosed business-wise by bad management, or signing a contract because they couldn't believe somebody was going to sign them to make recordings. And in that it says, oh yeah, this company owns all of your music forever. You get to tour and make a little money, but you're not going to make a penny off these records. And that's the downside of the music business, probably to this day, but certainly back then. The Sopranos touched on that very interestingly. They had a character that was, formerly ran a record label, rock and roll record label in the 50s, and I believe they get into how he just ripped off the artists and made all the money. A different kind of organized crime. Although I believe if you read the Tommy James and the Shondells, Crimson and Clover fame, if you read the Tommy James autobiography, I believe he talks a lot about how his record label was kind of in with a very organized set of criminals. It's really, really good. This is looks like it was shot a while ago, 2002, so the video quality is not HD, it's not 4K, but it still looks great. And it's really good. That's all I can say. I don't know that there's much more I can tell you. That it uses a lot of clips and it uses a lot of music. Visual quality of the clips comes and goes, but you expect, when you start watching a documentary like this, you expect that, okay, we're going to see some stills. We're probably going to see the same stills over and over again. We're going to see some clips from movie trailers, probably, because those are public domain. That you don't have to license those. Somehow Kenny Vance was able to make it work, and you're hearing the original recordings in this. You're seeing a lot of vintage performance clips, be they from news reel footage or from motion pictures or from TV appearances or whatever they are. It's really well put together. The disc is a little weird. Just because what you're used to at this point. This is one of those DVDs where you put the DVD in your player, and the tray closes, it starts playing the movie. When the movie's over, the disc stops. There's no menu, there's no chapters, there's no extras, there's no features, there's no nothing. It's just the movie, and that's okay. We're talking about the 50s. Pretend somehow you got the 50s equivalent of a DVD or a Blu-ray player, and it's just showing you the movie. That's fine. Some sections of this do look like they were standard def 4:3 that were blown up to widescreen to fit the overall frame. It's nothing egregious. I'm going to be the first person to say it really annoys me when footage is manipulated to fit a more modern look. I cannot stand how the majority of public spaces that have a TV have the picture squashed so everybody looks like an Oompa Loompa. This doesn't really do that, and that's cool. So I highly recommend this. This is Heart and Soul, a love story, available on DVD from MVD. It's probably streaming as well. Everything I talk about, I get physical copies of everything, so I'm going to say that it's how you can get it physically if you want to own it. And the only way to know that you're ever going to be able to watch something more than once is to own it. I might point out, from MVD, available now. Boy, it was good.